Hello and welcome to Differential Discussions. I'm Melissa,
And I'm Dave.
and today we're going to look at megakaryocytic leukemia. So an M7, AML M7. It would be under the the WHO classification system, not otherwise specified M7.
Mm. Yeah, and this is definitely a slide when I sit at the scope, right? So you go to the stainer and you're like, I'll help do some diffs. And then you pull a slide and you sit and you look in the scope and then you just cry and wish you didn't take it.
So it's really funny because I remember when this patient actually came in because the slide they left the tech left the slide and was like, this is crazy. And both days, Saturday and Sunday, they left the slide for me to do because it was such a terrible slide. So everybody get ready because this is going to be just like the M2 video where Dave and I are like
This is definitely tough for people that aren't experienced, and certainly even for us who I guess we could consider ourselves moderately experienced at this stuff. These are really tricky, and there's a lot of just going with the flow and doing your best.
yeah. So
Going with the flow.
literally, because patients like this, the lineages and the cell types are going to be designated by flow. So flow tells us exactly what these abnormal cells are. So even though in the peripheral blood we don't usually see megakaryocytes or any of the megakaryocytic lineage except for megfrags, like micromegakaryocyte fragments. You can see that during severe stress on the bone marrow in things like sickle cell disease or any type of disease that puts severe stress on the marrow. We're going to see everything in the marrow, I mean, in the peripheral blood in this patient because of the nature of this M7.
Yep.
I think the other thing is that the number of M7s that I've seen over my career, every single one has looked completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the other piece. The other piece that we have to consider is sometimes patients have myelofibrosis and progress to an AML M7. And so the peripheral blood smear is going to look completely different when they do that also.
Yeah.
So the challenge.
Yeah. So all we can kind of do is just offer, these little clues and hints, right, at what's going on to help discern. But almost always you're going to be relying on cytogenetics and flow and those other things to really understand what's going on.
Yep.
But cool.
All right. So you want to hop into it?
Yeah, we should. So, I mean, right away, the thing that stands out, there's a lot of things that stand out. So I want to talk about the platelets a little bit. And I think maybe even that term is a little bit of a liberal application, because these platelets, as we can see, kind of center lower field here. They look really super abnormal. Where they should have separated from each other, they haven't. They're still kind of all kind of stuck together. The granulation is incomplete or irregular, right? So I think that, a lot of times one of the things that we're trying to stress to students and young technologists and medical laboratory scientists is to find the abnormality. That's the most important part, right? That you don't just do a diff, say it's normal, and put it aside, but that you actually see that there's a concerning pathology present. This one is really easy to do that part. It's just hard to kind of tease everything else out.
Yes.
So really abnormal platelets.
Well, look, so usually the platelets are like 2 micrometers. They're very small. But for example, this is a platelet.
Yeah.
So, and you can see, like Dave was saying, this guy has granulation over here, but this section's not really quite as granulated. This is way larger than 2 micrometers.
Yeah.
Really funky looking. There's lots of pseudopods coming off of it. This one doesn't really have blebs, but there's lots of pseudopods on it and lots of like little pieces coming off. So it'll just vary, but the platelets are wonky. They are not normal looking. Like they're giant. They're really fun. Like this is a whole platelet here. Then you've got another one here. They're just really, really bizarre looking.
Yeah.
So
And, a bizarre, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, right? So these being abnormal looking platelets, it should be noted to some degree as the procedure will dictate, because it's good for a clinician to know that, hey, you might get a platelet count, but maybe those platelets aren't great,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, well, and I think that depends on the institution because I think some
Totally.
institutions wouldn't report platelet counts. They would put UTR, which is unable to report.
Hmm. Very good point too, right? Because it might not even be valuable to give a number, and for that reason, almost, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to give them a false sense that this person's not a bleed risk, or even could they even thrombose, Melissa? What do you think? Like,
Yeah, so when platelets are really abnormal, they can either lose functionality or gain
gain
functionality. And
function.
so, depending on what those platelets are doing, patients
Mhm.
could bleed or clot.
Yeah, very dangerous.
Yeah.
So yeah, wacky platelets.
All right. So, those are the platelets.
So then what should we talk about next?
Why don't we talk about some of the red cells?
Sure. Yeah, so some we have some aniso here, some variation in size of the red cells. There looks to be some inclusions.
Yeah.
I see some Howell Jolly bodies and some Pappenheimer bodies.
Yeah. So, we've got
Um,
a Howell Jolly body here.
hmm.
Looks like we've got another one here. Probably one here as well.
So
Few
given
other,
the number of inclusions, right, they probably don't have a functional spleen,
right?
if they have one at all. Um,
Yeah, so again, it depends. Like, for example, if the patient had myelofibrosis, then the spleen would have taken over the hematopoietic functions, and hematopoiesis would be less than optimal, and the cells would not come out being perfect. And then the spleen can't really do its quality control function because it's so busy doing hematopoiesis and the rest of the stuff that it's doing. So, if that's, for example, this patient, then they're going to have really no spleen that's doing its real function. And if not, then who knows what's happening with the patient? Maybe that patient had a splenectomy and it's unrelated completely to what's happening here because we don't know what's happening with the patient's spleen. But
mhm,
yeah, because of the number of inclusions here, it looks like there's not a functioning spleen.
mhm. Yep. We got one nucleated red cell there.
Yeah, so we've got an NRBC here. And then we had mentioned Pappenheimer, so there's some here. I just want to point them out. There's some
Please.
here. There's some spread throughout, but I feel like these are the easier ones to see.
Mm.
Yeah, polychromasia.
Yep.
Now the thing is, for less experienced folks, laboratorians, it's easy to look at this and be like, well, is that a polychromatophilic red cell?
Mm.
But again, it's granular, like a platelet is. And then of course it's got these weird plebs next to it, but because of the granules, you wouldn't expect to see a red cell like that because think about inclusions we see in red cells. None of the inclusions cover completely the red cell like that in the way that this is granular. So this would be a platelet and not a polychromatophilic red cell.
Mhm. It's a good point too. I think I take for granted that someone could make that kind of a mistake. Yeah, red cells just in general have no, not no texture, but yeah, I guess no
Yeah,
texture.
no texture, yeah. Or very mild texture, or
Mhm.
very like strategic texture, like Pappenheimer bodies, or Howell Jolly bodies, or basophilic stippling, and not texture like this guy right here has.
Mm. Yep, with his granules.
Yep.
All right.
What do you think about the Meg frag now?
Yeah, so we could talk about the megfrag. So um, what we're seeing here, it sort of looks like a smudge cell, and I would forgive someone for making that observation. Um, but what we see here, and this is kind of associated with, you know, most of the physiology, the presentation on the slide is going to stem from the pathophysiology of having these abnormal platelet megakaryocytes, thrombocytes being made. One of the functions of megakaryocytes is to have a really large number of nucleus, right? So what we're seeing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, is an expelled nucleus from a pathologic megakaryocyte. Does that kind of?
So it's a fragment of it. So it does take usually one of the nuclei, but it does steal some cytoplasm. So that's
And you
why we
can
can
see
see
that, right?
some cytoplasm like right here
Mhm.
and in this
Very
area.
wispy.
Yeah, it's very wispy and hard to see. There might be some up there, but it's hard to see, but you can clearly see this down here. And
Mhm.
if you look, this cytoplasm that you do see that's here and wispy kind of looks like
Mhm.
these platelets over here.
Mhm.
The same sort of coloration, the same sort of texture. And that's because, remember, platelets come from megakaryocytes. So when we have micromegakaryocyte fragments, so they're megakaryocyte fragments, and we call them micro because they're small compared to megakaryocytes, which are the largest cell in the marrow. So sometimes you'll hear us call them megfrags or micromegs. We're talking about the same thing. These
Mhm.
guys right here, these micromegakaryocyte fragments. Yep. And so, like Dave said, you'll see this when there's stress on the marrow.
Mhm.
So in this case, there's definitely stress on the marrow. There's this malignant process that's taken over the marrow, right? So if it's a regular straight AML, the malignant myelophthisic anemia that goes with AML, where the malignant cells have taken over the marrow and there's just no space for hematopoiesis, that puts pressure on whatever functional megakaryocytes you do have in the marrow.
Mhm.
And then if it was a myelofibrosis that transitioned to an AML, then you have lots of fibrotic material in there putting stress on the marrow, putting stress on developing hematopoietic cells, or it's coming from the spleen, which is not the spleen or the liver, which are not ideal environments for this. So it's easy to see why you would have these micromegakaryocyte fragments in either of these cases.
Mhm. And and what would make this not a smudge cell, right, is that presence of that cytoplasm. So careful eye, notice that wispy cytoplasm that's still present. If this was in fact just a lymph that smudged, you're only going to see the nucleus, the nuclear material.
Yeah, yeah. And the way this is usually counted is you count it like you would count NRBCs. So you tally them, the number that you see per 100 white cells counted. So they're not counted as part of your 100. And if you're correcting your WBC count for their presence, it's the same formula as we've discussed in the past.
Mhm.
And you do have to correct it when you see your white cell count, when you do see a lot of these and the white cell wasn't corrected for it by the instrument.
Right.
So
You have to see how or you have to understand how the instrument is seeing these cells, or whatever term you want to kind of attach to them. They are going to fluorescence stain as if they were a nucleated cell, and they will be in fact counted as such. You want to take them out of the white cell count because they're in fact not a white cell, right? They're not functioning in any kind of immune capacity whatsoever. We want to make sure when the clinical team gets a white cell count that it's representative
yeah.
of the white cells as much as possible.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so I think we hit the other things in the field, and now we've got to go to the
This
elephant in the
fella.
field.
Yeah. Yeah, this fella here. So some of these cells, we're probably going to look at several fields. Some of these cells are a little bit darker, and it's harder to see the nucleus well. This one, we can see the nucleus pretty well. But one of the things that stands out is the cytoplasm and what the cytoplasm is doing. And part of platelet formation from a megakaryocyte, a healthy functioning megakaryocyte, is a process we call protoplatelet formation, right? And so in this sense, a megakaryocyte is manufacturing the granules and all the goodies that belong inside platelets. And at the periphery of the membrane, it's pinching off little pieces, and those pieces break away and become healthy functioning platelets. So now, knowing that, when I see a cell that's doing something like this, there's two particular things that pop into mind. This is either of megakaryocyte lineage, as is the case here. And the other thing I may think about would be hairy cell. Hairy cell can have these kind of little flyaway things. I've never seen when I see abnormal platelets like I see also in this field, it makes the distinction much easier. So I don't think I've ever seen a hairy cell that had really abnormal wonky platelets. So, but yeah, so those little flyaways off of the membrane appear to be platelets forming.
Mhm.
I'm going to call them platelets.
Little blebs.
Yep.
And
So
yes,
that makes
bleb
it a
is
little
a
bit
scientific
easier.
term.
What's that? Sorry?
Bleb is a scientific term.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so I think a lot of times on this channel we're talking about nuclear chromatin. I think the job gets a lot easier with these in that, you know what, it doesn't matter what the nucleus is doing. We care about the cytoplasm here.
The other thing is a lot of these cells, this cell in particular, and its clones, the nucleus is so dark that you really can't see the features. And that, I guess, in itself is a feature of this cell and this, and its clones. So I think really when students and young techs look at this, they're going to think it's a lymph.
Yeah. Yep.
And really, one of the best things is that it looks like a lymph, but with blebs, like these little platelety blebs. And again, this is where flow cytometry comes in. And Flo told us that these are abnormal megakaryoblasts. And you're all looking at it like, say what? We agree. We agree with you. Yeah. Say what? But that was what, happened in particular for this case.
Yeah.
Like I said, each case is going to be different, and flow is going to really dictate what these cells are. So for this cell in particular, it's an abnormal, malignant, teeny tiny megakaryoblast. Remember, megakaryocytes and blasts are usually ginormous. This one's and its clones are going to be very teeny tiny, and that's just this case in particular. And so these are counted as part of the 100. They just have to be their own category.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, this is a really bizarre one. I think a lot of you might go through your whole career and not see something like this. It's entirely possible. But I spend a little bit of time on the dark staining nucleus. We're going to see some, I'm pretty confident, because I don't think it's rare. I think it's pretty common where we have a nucleus that's really, really dark staining. And what I've seen a lot is I see techs questioning the stain. Something's wrong with the stain, right? They'll stain a second slide, which I generally, I won't fault you for trying one more time, right? If you get a second slide that's producing the same effect, stop. You have to kind of trust what's going on here, because really dark staining of a nucleus is actually indicative of problems with the cell, okay? So you can definitely have differential staining across these cell lines, and that's a clue of malignancy, a clue of abnormality. So don't throw away that valuable piece of information. I know you want to restain the slide and everything look beautiful and like normal, but you got to accept the facts on the ground sometimes, even if they're hard to deal with.
Not everything is beautiful for us to look at, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. It's hard, you know.
All right, ready for me to move?
Yeah, let's look around.
Come back.
We got a neutrophil in the center-ish of the field. And then, in the bottom right, okay? So I have the hindsight of the previous field, and I know this slide. I've looked at this slide countless times, but I have the benefit of hindsight in the prior field. You should be in that mindset of abnormal stuff. This is not a lymphocyte. Even a normal resting lymph that has a dark clump nucleus, I can still see the detail in a normal lymph. The detail is gone from this. It is not just the video. It is not just the recording. It is almost impossible to see any of the real detail inside that nucleus. Yeah. And then what do we have in the cytoplasm? We have those little blebs, right? So I would automatically put in the bucket as the micro megakaryoblast or if you had other as a category, whatever, this is the bird of that feather that we saw in the last field.
Yeah. This is the abnormal megakaryoblast.
Mhm.
We'll just put abnormal.
Sounds good to me.
And then there's a bunch of platelets.
Yep. And yeah, platelets, air quotes.
Yeah, air quotes. All of these guys up here.
Yeah. We have some polychromatophilia in the reds, nucleated red
Yeah. So
cell.
this is great because like that. So
Mhm.
this is polychromasia.
Mhm. Yep. And then,
Polychromasia versus platelets.
yep.
And then an NRBC up here. And you can see we have like Howell Jolly bodies,
More inclusions.
Pappenheimer bodies. We've got a bunch of inclusions again.
And then peeking in the bottom left of the screen there, we have what looks like another abnormal megakaryoblast. You can attempt, Melissa, but I wouldn't fault you if. There you go. Yep. And you know, this one's maybe a little bit more subtle.
This one's nice. Like you can actually see some of the features and see it a little bit, but it's still one of those. We're talking about this guy here, by the way.
And you know what? If someone told me this was a hairy cell without knowing anything else about the slide, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say and guess on.
Yeah.
Because some of those little fibrous protoplatelets that look a lot like how a hairy cell can look.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a vacuum, just that
In a
one
vacuum.
on its own, but given the context of everything else.
Yep. And so we have two. Is there cytoplasm on that one? It looks like in the bottom right there is. It looks like we got two frags.
Yeah, it looks like two frags. This one. Excuse me, and that one.
Mm-hmm. We have a
Some
neutrophil.
Random arrow, I forgot to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we got a neutrophil. Some of these weird platelets again.
Yep. Oh wow, is that one a platelet? I thought that was a red cell. In the bottom, that yeah.
Yeah, this one.
Got texture to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm losing it. Yeah, that's cool.
And then of course there's inclusions,
Yes.
caps, and HJs.
Yep. And some of these have this like a target centerish field that looks like it's kind of got like a weird hemoglobin concentration to it.
Yeah. So like this guy looks like a target.
Mm-hmm.
This guy looks like a
Yep.
target. Yeah. So we'll have to keep our eye out and see if we'd call targets.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's probably unlikely we will, I think, but so that looks so if neutrophil top left, yeah, boring. And then we got these three cells here. So the top one, is that a nuke? Is that an NRBC? Yeah. So be careful here. I don't know why this particular red cell cytoplasm has that like fuzzy kind of well, I guess I do know why. He's grew up in a war zone, right? So let's or she, you know, this poor cell has been through hell and back. And I suppose it wouldn't be a total travesty if you counted this as one of the abnormal megakaryocytes, but that is in fact an RBC. And then we have an abnormal megakaryoblasts. And then, you know, I would argue the bottom one is the same, but they look different. So we're getting a little bit of heterogeneity, I guess, in the presentation of these bad micromegs.
I think the only reason though is because this guy's much larger.
Yeah, that's the thing that's making it look much weird. That's a good point.
So we can actually see some of the features, but the blebs.
Right.
And also it doesn't, the chromatin pattern doesn't look quite blasty.
Right. And I think that's one of the things we'll notice here is that these abnormal platelets actually have somewhat mature nuclei. Um, they're just not normal.
Yeah.
This is hard.
This one, yeah, this one's challenging. That's why everyone left this slide for me.
Hmm. Melissa, can you look at this? And then they sneak away. This is a
Oh
cool
no,
feature.
it was just I left this slide for you.
How convenient.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. This one is a challenging one though.
Yeah, yeah.
So we have NRBCs.
Yep. Agreed.
And then this one actually looks like a mono.
Yep, I agree.
We have a monocyte here.
And so there's a little bit of a pink coloration to the monocytoplasm. They can have pink granules, totally normal.
Yep.
It's totally normal. And then far left, I love this.
He's kind of funky looking.
He's kind of funky. I kind of, my intuition, my gut instinct was, is it a baso?
That's mine too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like it. I don't see anything else in here.
Yeah, I think if you, you know, if I'm in the hot seat, I would say baso.
I think so too, because it looks like this area has those granules, those basophilic granules on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just it's not a neutrophil to me. Yeah, I think more than anything, it's like it's not a neutrophil, it's not a neutrophil lineage. So like what what is it, right? And then they just kind of, I'm left with baso. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. There's 4 targets here.
I got 2 targets, yeah. I'm gonna eat my words, maybe. We'll see. I don't remember what the red cell morph is for the key on this one.
That's because it's not the most exciting thing.
Maybe it's because I want to forget. I
Yeah,
want to forget this one.
right?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I think they're yep. Okay, so center field is what I'm most interested to talk about. Those look like primary granules. What do you think? Looks like a
Yeah.
promylo.
Looks like a promylo.
Yep. Pretty cool. And so, you know, and I get this from students all the time. You can see promyelocytes in a thrombocytic, you know, an M7, and it's like, yeah. I could see a promyelocyte in literally any condition that someone could possibly have. We have to kind of separate normal physiology and pathophysiology sometimes. You can just have pros happen because they happened.
Yeah, I mean it could be part of the malignant process if the patient has myeloid involvement in like the neutrophilic lineage and the platelet lineage, or it could just be a normal pro that escaped.
Yep, absolutely.
We can't distinguish, and then it just has a vacuole in it. That's all this guy is, and any cell can have a vacuole.
Yep. But you know, the nucleus couple, it's pretty consistent with what I would expect from a pro. So.
Yeah.
And then we have like a dark blue platelet up in the corner there, huh? That's one of the darker ones we've seen so far.
Oh my gosh, look, we actually have a few normal platelets too.
We do. You know, it's good that you point that out, because I don't think we've seen a normal platelet yet, and we have a couple of them, more than a couple.
Looks like this one's on top of like an acanthocyte.
Mm-hmm.
And then some more normals. Crazy, there's normal platelets.
Mm-hmm.
And then this looks like a neutrophil.
Yeah, I'd go neutrophil. Yeah.
And an NRBC.
Nukes. Pretty cool.
Cool. See.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna go this way.
I'll take one of everything.
Yeah.
All right, you want to take the lead here? What do you want to start?
I'm trying to pull it up a little bit higher. Too high. There we go. Okay. All right. So why don't we start over here?
Okay. All right, I'll take the easy one. Neutrophil.
Yeah, we've got neutrophil and we've got a basophil.
Beza. Yep.
Nice that they're next to each other.
Yes, I do like when they compare themselves directly like that.
Yeah.
And then another one of our promyelocytes looks like on the right there.
Yeah, he looks like a pro.
And then a meta.
Yeah, I think he's a meta. He's more mature than the pro, and his indent looks like it's less than 50% the width of the nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a vacuole.
It does. Yep.
Again, doesn't matter really.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, it might show that the neutrophilic lineage is kind of like doing stuff.
It's stressed.
It's stressed. Yep. And then we have two. We have a nucleated red blood cell. I think you were going to point that out first.
Yep.
And then we have two of our abnormal megakaryocyte cells, megakaryoblasts.
They're beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the blebs. Like, look at how blebby they are and how funky looking. It does look almost lymphy. I guess this one almost looks more plasma cell-y with like the super round nucleus and very eccentrically placed, but it just doesn't look right. So there's something abnormal about it. So we know we're looking at this cell. I mean, I'm talking about mostly this one right here, but we're looking at it. We know it's abnormal, and we know it has to be an abnormal megakaryoblast because that's what this patient has. Again, Flo told us that that's what this one was. If you looked at it and thought it could be like in a vacuum an abnormal plasma cell, sure, okay, in a vacuum I could totally go with that. But in the context again of the patient having these, we know that it's blebby and it looks like megakaryocytic.
Those blebs and the cytoplasm in that cell too, really, really dark blue.
Yeah.
Very dark blue.
Yep.
Which is weird.
Which is the interesting thing because megakaryocytes aren't usually super basophilic except really like during maturation. So it's really, really funky looking. And then like this guy looks more lymphy.
Yeah. Yep.
But again, he's got weird little blebs coming off and
and I get, in all honesty too, and that cell in a vacuum, if those two like big blebs weren't there, you could probably just coast right by that cell and not even think twice. So yeah. Spooky.
It's really cool.
It is cool.
Not for a patient, but it's really cool for us to see like the different how different these diseases can look.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, cool. So it looks like a red cell spitting out a nucleus. We kind of caught that's neat. It's not super uncommon to see a red cell expel nucleus where there's NRBCs, but to see it so, that's cool. And it looks like there's a hollow jolly body left just behind where it kind of, yeah, that's really cool. And we have a funky platelet on top of a neutrophil.
And then we got, a big platelet. And then another neutrophil. Some NRBCs.
Yep.
Another mono.
Wow. Look how dark those cells are.
Yeah. This one's funky looking. It's kind of like, wait, are they bilobed? It looks like this one is bilobed.
Yep.
So again, this is one of the abnormals. It also looks like this little guy here is another abnormal one.
Yeah. So look at the variation in presentation of these cells. It's so bizarre. Very weird. For all three of them, to be the same thing is wild.
Yeah.
So I'm not as brave, but you want to take the lead on this other?
Well, this one looks mono-y,
Yeah,
and this one looks similar,
yeah,
except all those granules. This one's like a really heavily granulated one.
yeah. See, so there's like a piece of me that wonders if they're granulocytic lineage.
Well, this one I think is mono.
Yeah,
This one, I'm like, it looks mono-y in the nucleus. And then the
yeah.
cytoplasm, it does look granular.
This is trickier than the abnormal cells.
I know. I'm gonna go with the mono.
I'll defer.
I'm gonna go with monos for both of them. This one looks mono-y. And this one, the nuclear chromatin matches this one.
Mm,
It's just those granules that are kind of weird for me.
yeah, a little weird. That was a little weird.
Yeah, funky. Just neutrophils. I'm just looking to see what else we can find.
Mhm.
Okay. So it looks like these guys are the abnormals.
Yep.
And then this one looks like a megakaryocyte fragment.
That's a great fragment too, isn't it?
It actually looks like it stole 2 lobes this time.
Mm. Mm.
Looks like they're separated here.
Mm. Yeah, and so yeah, I wish we had a picture ready so they could see. Yeah, look up megakaryocytes.
Oh,
They
look
would
at
they would roughly be about the size of this field, more or less. Probably take up like 70% of it. And they're what are the numbers, Melissa? What, 12 to 20 nuclei or something?
32 to 64.
Like, oh, it was close, you know.
In
And to my
a fully mature megakaryocyte.
and in my defense, regular techs aren't usually looking at
No.
megakaryocytes very often.
No. And even when you are, like the lobes, think of it again, it's a 3D cell. So when you smash it into a 2D structure, it's hard to count the number of lobes inside of a megakaryocyte.
See, she's on my side. She's trying to make me look better.
It's rough. It's like more knowing that kind of stuff is like obscure theory.
It's theory. Yeah. And I can be both good on theory and then poor with it, depending on my utilization.
Well, and it's coag, so
yeah. Yeah, I've had someone helping me with coag for a while now.
But yeah.
Cool.
Yep. So this one, yeah, he stole 2 lobes.
Yep.
Or 2 of those nuclei.
There's one other cell type that we're looking for. We're trying to find for the audience.
Kind of cruise around and see if I can find it.
Sure. Excuse me, I apologize. Hey. Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
So.
Yeah. So actually, a couple things. Oh, I don't even want to say it. All right, so we've come across something a cell that has a nucleus that looks very immature.
Mm.
So a lot of the abnormal megakaryocytes that we've seen, they have we focused on the cytoplasm, and rightfully so, because it's been such a red flag to have those blebby things hanging off. But the nucleuses have looked like pretty like dark and clumped, and now we have one that has a really fair chromatin pattern. Yep. So this one looks like some kind of a blast form.
Yep. I don't even want to say a regular blast.
Yeah.
They're not regular, but they're not these weird abnormal megakaryoblasts. They're a different blast.
Right.
So this would be called separately. And that's different from a blast is a blast is a blast. Usually you just kind of lump blasts into a category. But again, that was dictated by flow.
Yeah.
Because typically, you're not going to differentiate whether it's a myeloblast, a monoblast, a megakaryoblast just looking at them. But because these are so atypical, that's why they're being lumped into their own category.
Yeah.
But typically blasts are blasts, right? And so this looks like a more traditional blast that you would see in a leukemia versus this, which looks like a blebby lymph.
That's where I'm like looking at the cell to the far left, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah, well, this one, that's why I pointed to it at first, and I was like, I'm gonna go back to that one because this one, it looks lymphy.
Yeah. But you can't say one way or the other with a high degree of confidence. This slide definitely turns your head upside down. Because have we seen any normal lymphs yet? I don't think we've seen any on this scan, have we? I mean, truth be told, it might be a lymph, it might not be. And you know, I don't know that it matters in the grand scheme clinical picture.
Unfortunately.
And then we have a nuke, right? We should point out that the NRBC. Yep.
We have an NRBC here.
And then a meta.
We have one there.
In the fields.
Yeah, and then we have this guy down here. He looks like a meta.
Agreed. All right, so we kind of hit. What do you think?
Yeah, we hit the major different abnormal cells that are in this slide. And again, I just want to reiterate, looking at M7s, each patient looks different. Yeah. You know, even all the different ones I've seen through my career, every single M7 looks different. Yeah. So it really is going to come down to flow. But what you have to recognize is that these cells are abnormal, which I think is fairly easy for this slide for us to be like, this is abnormal. We're going to put it to the side or give it to the pathologist or whatever your hospital's policy is. So for us, it's really recognizing that they're abnormal. And then, of course, Dave and I want to give you some characteristics and some information about these cells. But again, it'll vary from patient to patient. So this is a unique case, and this was a really challenging differential to look at. So if you looked at this and now you feel like you don't know anything, don't feel bad. This is a terrible slide for us, for laboratorians to try to evaluate because it's so complex.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would groan every time I did this stuff. I know I would, it's not going to get easier.
No, it doesn't. How many years have we been looking at this slide and we're still like,
it's still like, ugh.
So, it's a challenge. But I think that's all we have for this slide. So thanks for watching.
Thank you. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you'd like notifications whenever we post a new video. And feel free to reach out to us on social media or via email with comments or suggestions about future content. Thanks.